You
Soon
were
as
really good on WSLS, Kev.
you were too.
They were having mic problems out up on the mountain, so my mic was cutting in and out, minuscule ins and outs, so my voice was really wavering up and down until Edward switched off mics eventually, and we shared a mic after a while.
Added to the effect.
Well, I just double checked and we're good. We're live on YouTube. So Alex should be joining here at some point. I'd got a message from him saying he got the word. So
Okay.
Dave, I figured what we could do, speak of the devil. Um, can you hear us, Alex?
Yeah, I've got you. Do you got me?
Yep, got you
Sure.
good. Well, I figure, and just as I told him, we just went live on YouTube. So, um, Dave, I figured what we could do is just kind of continue the conversation from last Saturday, 2 Saturdays ago. And I know you had some questions for us and some other things you wanted to bring up, and uh, we all may have some pictures. I've got some queued up as well, and everybody is enabled to be able to share their screen. So I will defer to you and the
Yeah.
cat.
Uh, yeah, this is Rusty, by the way. All right,
Hey,
Rusty,
Rusty.
get out of the way. Um, so yeah, first off, to kind of apologize for running so late on that Saturday. I always had too much material. Not, I guess too much is better than not enough. Not enough though. And I wanted to bring you all in more, kind of get your take, because each one of you represents kind of a different decade essentially, or a different chunk of time. So I wanted to kind of get your opinions on some different things and individual storms as well. So just as a quick recap, from the severe storm conference, we focused on how the technology changed over time from the 90s. And I kind of broke it down from the early 90s to early 2000s, because we seem to see kind of breaks in technology, not perfectly lined up with decades, but they were offset a little bit. So early 90s to early 2000s, when technology really started and connectivity really started to take off. And then this kind of the social media end of things really started taking off more after the kind of that 2012 kind of time frame and stuff. So, so anyway, and then, more recently, post-pandemic, we didn't get to talk a little bit about some of those kinds of things and some of the challenges that we've had finding lodging and things like that. I know Alex is certainly remembers some challenging times recently in terms of lodging out there. So, so anyway, just to kind of give everybody just a kind of a quick rundown. And you know, I saw the biggest changes weren't post Twister. In my time out there, it wasn't post Twister, but it was post Twister plus an increase in the level of technology, making the weather data more available on the road to more people. And we really started to see that kind of crank up, 2002, that kind of time frame, is when it really started to become better. You could actually get some connectivity out away from the big cities and things like that. And then, and Andrew and Kevin remembers when we kind of stepped forward with the beta testing the in-car Wi-Fi units for essentially BMW, and that really expanded the horizons. And I think we had changed quite a bit at that point and had pretty good connectivity. It's still challenging in places, especially out in the Western Plains, but that increased even more. And then so once we hit 2012, I think more than the technology changes, it was more of a social media influence started to kind of take over. And then in the post-pandemic era, technology is still a bigger thing. We don't have as much problem with streaming kind of occupying cell networks and overwhelming them like we did early on, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. But what we see is an increase yet again in the number of chasers. And I mentioned that with the Hokies, we simply have adapted and evolved over time. And the I've never changed the recipe for the trip. All of you all are very, very familiar with how we kind of run things on the trip. And in 2014, you guys ran it on your own without me when my wife was having cancer surgery. And so the recipe. We couldn't do that. We can't do that in May anymore. So we shifted our window to later in the season. We know the challenges that can crop up with that in terms of a ridging pattern and things like that can happen or more likely to happen at that point in time. But as Kevin can kind of allude to, God, it seemed like mid-May we always ended up with northwest flow out there in the middle of May. So we had a period of time there where we had opposite problems. But you take that pattern and put it in the end of June, that's actually a good chase pattern in June. So there are some trade-offs, but we had to simply evolve with the times. And for better or for worse, that's where we are.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that the technology piece because 2002 was my first chase out there, and I was my son was finishing up his second year at OU, and we decided to go out and do some chasing. And he had I think it was a flip phone or something with a small screen that we could get satellite images and maybe some really early radar stuff. But most of it was just, paper maps and a weather radio
Yep.
and the Mark One eyeball, and from there it got really, as I started, chased a few times after that with family and then chasing with you, I started in 2011. You're right. The technology really ramped up, especially when these things came along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, Kevin, you were there pretty early on as the technology got better through the years. So, what did you notice from, your time, all the times, the decades that you've been out there? Were there any kind of break-even points where you felt like, wow, this represents a kind of a huge evolutionary step forward?
Well, I went with y'all the first time in 2005, and my last one was 2018. Um, from that time, it changed a ton. It was like, the first year we were sometimes pulled into, hotel parking lots, kind of picking off the Wi-Fi there, because our connectivity wasn't good. But a few years later, we're running those AutoNet units, and I remember the power. The night the power was out at Waukene, Kansas, and everybody else that was there was hooking onto our Wi-Fi. That out of the vans. I think didn't you say you had like 20 something people detected that were hooking up to ours on that night, something like that.
Yeah, in fact, the Waukene, the management staff was actually using our Wi-Fi to continue their bookings and stuff like that because they had lost everything in the storm. And that was kind of an eventful night. I know Andrew remembers that, walking into the lobby with the blown out windows and
Mhm.
and the doors, and then the crew from Pennsylvania that was bleeding and stuff sitting around in the lobby and on the stairs, and they were all in a daze. And so we actually hooked up the units and in the rooms and Wi-Fi'd the hotel for them so people could contact people back home, tell them that they're safe. The Super 8 actually used the AutoNet units to kind of continue their reservations and get people checked in.
Yeah, that was an eventful one because we stayed in that Super 8 the morning of, and then the same night. And I remember a couple of the chasers went across the street to the little gas station across the way and get some stuff before we left. And the guy working at the counter was like, "Where y'all from?" Because he could obviously tell we weren't from Central Kansas. And they said we're from Virginia. And they said, "What are you doing here?" It's like we're storm chasing. he's like, well, we don't ever get any storms here. And then that night, same thing. His front windows were all blown out, and next morning he's boarded up. So a little unfortunate speaking on his part, but
Yeah, a little bit of karma there.
Yeah, for context, that was the we thought we were done with the chase and we dropped what 4 or 5 miles south of Waukene, and a
Mhm.
new storm was forming, and it spawned a tornado that we had a very close sunset intercept, and then it went right, almost hitting the hotel, and it hit the convenience store across the road, and like a campground some distance away there was hit
Mhm.
pretty bad. So, that was a time when we sort of did become participants in addition to being observers.
Yeah, and if you remember on that east-west road that was south of I-70, when we made the tornado intercept, we turned around and our east route was blocked. Both lanes were blocked by chasers parked at the intersection. We could not go east to get out, so we had to kind of surf the mesocyclone to the north until we could actually find an east route. It wasn't very far, but it was far enough. And but we had a direct line to get out of that, and we couldn't because even back then, 2008, chaser convergence prevented us from escaping that the outer edges of the mesocyclone.
I think, over those years, 2005 to 10, at first we would see the TIV out there, at first it was kind of, oh, look at that, that's pretty neat, that's fun, it's a TIV, and then later the Dominator that Reed Timmer drives, and it'd be kind of fun, but when we were out in the storms, there would be like almost like groupies, following them and stuff, and it got to be, it almost got to be frustrating to see, we went to, in 2010, we were going to Baldo. We were trying to get ahead of what was it Vortex? It was out
Vortex
there.
2.
Mhm.
Vortex
Yeah,
2. Yeah.
Vortex, and they also had the Stormchase, the Timmer, not Timmer, they had Tiv and some of them with them, and we were trying to get out ahead of them. It turns out they didn't even go up into South Dakota that day. They stayed at North Platte, but as time went along, we were just noticing more and more traffic related to the social media, to the TV show Storm Chasers, and that really picked up so much to the point that Chris and I leading the trip in 2014 were encountering that not in Oklahoma, not in Kansas, but in east of Denver. I mean, we decided to core punch some storms before they went severe to get out of traffic there.
Yeah, I remember that. We were heading east and whatever that one east-west road was, staying just ahead of all the radar trucks and all the groupies following them. Then we got to was it
Last
Last
chance.
Chance?
Yeah.
And we pulled up just beside each other and looked at the radar, looked at the sky, looked at the radar, looked at the traffic, said, we got to punch through this before it gets bad. Yeah, I remember, and speaking of groupies, I guess it was 2011 was my first trip with you, Dave, and that was, I think, was the first trip with a mesonet on top of the van, I believe.
Mhm.
And we had people that at that point starting to follow us because they knew we were chasing because we had the equipment. And there was a couple times that year and probably a year or two after that where we would wind up with, especially on weekends when you're out
Yeah.
there, we'd wind up with some locals following us because they wanted to see the storms.
There was one trip that I don't remember which one it was, but there was this Jeep that was following us, but they were trying to act like they weren't following us. So when we pulled into a gas station, we were filling up. They like parked around the corner of the building just enough so we could see the nose of their car, so they could keep an eye on us. But it was just like, if you're gonna follow us, just follow us. Don't hide. Like, come over and talk to us if you're at least gonna, like, at least engage a little bit. Don't be creeping behind the gas station wall.
And I can't remember the year, but there was another car that followed us into, I think it was eastern Missouri or western Missouri, just east of the Kansas border. And they finally kind of came up and said, "Hey, we're kind of tagging you guys. You mind if we follow along?" And we ended up busting that day. So they followed us all day to a bust. So they learned their lesson quick. Let's don't follow these clouds anymore. But yeah, Kevin, you were mentioning South Dakota, that particular trip. What was interesting with that was the fact that it had been really, really wet. They had also had a winter storm up there not too long, prior to the Bowdle tornado that we intercepted. But it was really, really wet. You can even see in the video that the dirt road. So, that was a paved road only for us. And I do remember there were a bunch of chasers that got stuck. And they got lucky because there was, one of the tornadoes in the Bowdle family nearly mowed them down. I think a farmer made a few $1,000 pulling people out off of that dirt road with his tractor later on.
Yeah, I remember driving east west across South Dakota those days we were there, just seeing the amount of standing water in the fields out there. It's like there's these intermittent lakes just showing up. And I even think at one point on US Highway 2, it was either closed to flooding or like we had to kind of like change lanes to get around some standing water in the road or something like that, just because of how much standing water there had been in the farm fields adjacent to it.
Yeah, and one thing, and I know you guys can kind of comment on this too, is, we've been through the years, and every one of you all have been through outbreaks out there with us, high risk kinds of days and stuff like that. And I tell you, to me, those kinds of days are so overrated. You can only be on one storm at a time. And I know like the back-to-back high risk days, PDS watches back in 2008 in Kansas. At the end of those days, we were still trying to figure out how many tornadoes we saw, but that was exhausting. Try because all those storms in 2008 and May 22nd, 23rd, or 22nd, 23rd, whatever those dates were, yeah, they were all moving at 50 miles an hour. And I know for you navigators at back at that point, Andrew, they're just trying to keep us alive, because we were actually trying to tail a storm and then not get clobbered by the next one coming in.
And
And at
they're
the
just
end
going
of
in
the
circles.
day, yeah, at the end of the day, that was just absolutely exhausting because virtually every storm was tornadic.
Well, in that at least the first day, we had to go dirt roads. There was no option to use paved roads because there was one good paved road north south for 10-mile range on either side. And so the day started okay. We could keep up on dirt roads. I mean, we ate our fair share of West Kansas that day. But as the day went on and these storms were training over the same area, the road started getting worse and worse. And I remember looking, I don't know if it was the first day or the second day, but looking out the window and Kevin's van was in front of us and he was tracking 45 degrees up a hill trying to get up the hill. We made it up there, but that van was, completely sideways trying to make it up the hill, but we didn't have any other choice out there.
Yeah, that the idea of those moderate and high risk kind of things. I think Dave knows, and probably Kevin knows too, that I've considered that I have the White family moderate risk curse, because almost every moderate risk I've ever chased out there and back here has been either a bust or something close to it. One of the ones I remember with the Hokies, and Kevin, I think the three of us were out there. It was in 2012. We came up from Lawton, Oklahoma, I think, and we came up to I-40 and stopped where we could get cell signal. And there was a moderate risk forecast for like northwest Oklahoma and southern Kansas. And we sat there for a while, and we all wanted to go up there. And we sat there for a while, and Dave's looking at the observations, and Dave's looking at the observations, and he's looking at the panhandle of Texas, Childress, Texas. He said, "That's looking pretty tornado-ish to me." Childress, Texas. And we convinced him to go north. Guess what? Blue sky bust. Guess where his tornado was? Childress, Texas. That's when I learned to trust Dave completely.
WWDD, what would Dave do? That's what Chris and I followed in 2014 when we were leading the chase ourselves is what would Dave do? WWDD.
It's such a recipe. Every atmospheric day is different. And I know back in as was 2003. The Back when we had the state police interceptor. I guess this was Seth Price's first trip too. But the SPC had outlooked northwest Oklahoma, southwest Kansas with the severe risk, just a slight risk, I believe it was. And we were on I-40. We'd chased the previous day, And we were woke up to thunder, lightning in the morning. I walked outside. There was elevated convection. It was 48 degrees. This is, this is not happening, So looked at the radar. We saw an outflow boundary on the radar cruising south towards the Red River. And so I felt like, yeah, that's our only shot, even though it was not in the forecast at all. But there was going to be a triple point between a dry line and that outflow boundary somewhere south of the Red River. So we drove south from I-40 into northwest Texas. And when we stopped for gas south of the Red River, near Archer City, I stepped out of the van and it was warm, it was humid, and it was windy. And the cumulus towers were already climbing. I knew we had made the right decision. And we had the whole storm to ourselves. And I guess there was one tornado report in the country that day, and it was on that storm south of the Red River. Nothing fired to the north, up in in Kansas and northwest Oklahoma. So just have to read the tea leaves with what's going on out there right now. And yeah, sometimes it pans out, sometimes it doesn't. I know Alex, let's see, what year was it? It was a ballistic looking pattern. Was it 2019 maybe? When we were out there, I'm trying to remember. There were a bunch of enhanced risks every day,
Yeah.
southwest flow over the Western Plains. It was the year of the Mexican wildfire
Yep.
smoke.
Yeah. And it was hazy just about every storm we were on. And you could be within maybe 2 or 3 miles of the mezzo and you could not see it.
Yeah.
And that was also the trip of the high risk where the cams were blowing up stuff all over Oklahoma and the Red River. And we got a flat tire in Paducah, Texas, or somewhere around there. And I think you told me there was a tornado warning cell went right over that spot where we got towed
Yeah,
from.
PDS tornado
Yeah.
warning for that intersection where our van was stranded with a flat tire. We carried the tire repair kit, but I'd previously used it to help an old man on the side of the road. And karma came back to hit us there because only did then realize none of the vans had spares.
Yeah.
And we had previously used the fix-a-flat stuff. So, so we ended up shuttling people to Childress in teams, and I waited for the tow truck in the van. So Alex, you all shuttled people up towards Childress, and yeah, there was a PDS tornado warning where our van was. It was right in the middle of it. For a confirmed large rain-wrapped tornado. We're stuck on the side of the road there. So,
And shout out to Walmart for getting us back on the road that night. I think
yeah,
they got the new tire on, and I think we maneuvered to
yeah,
intercept something right at dark, but
yeah,
the haze and the wildfire smoke, you still couldn't see anything.
yeah. That was a very frustrating trip because we continually placed ourselves in great spots.
Mm-hmm.
Just couldn't see anything. Couldn't see anything at all.
It was also the trip where we started off with a bang with, I think, a day 2 catch of McCook, that tornado in 2019.
Yeah.
So the rest of the trip was very frustrating with the haze and the wildfires and things like that.
Yeah, that was a Bonner's Springs, Kansas,
Yeah.
1,000-mile drive the first day. So, and then Chris, I remember, let's see, which trying to remember. We had something similar. In Iowa, it was on the Joplin day. We were actually between trips. We were actually coming across I-80 to pick up the second group. So this was in May. It was the Joplin day. We intercepted a tornado, a high NDF2. It went in the books as, but it was pretty rural. Actually had a damage path that was longer than the Joplin tornado, but we were seeing reports coming out from Joplin later that day as we were kind of crossing back after chasing. I can't remember how far we made it after the chase and after the tornado intercept. I think we may have made it into Illinois for the night. I don't
I
remember.
think so. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
I was
were
in Rango.
Marengo, Iowa was where we were
Yeah.
because I remember we had not given up, but we kind of exited that storm. It had a wall cloud, but didn't do anything. And then one of the students in the back, Amanda, basically said, "Hey, I see a funnel." So we turned north into town and stopped at that parking lot and watched the funnel come down into touchdown. But I think we couldn't follow it because I think it was road construction. The road was closed, so we had to backtrack. But yeah, I think we did wind up in Illinois that day, that evening.
Yeah, and I think all three of you all, Andrew too, probably can all comment on the road construction in eastern Colorado that has been a bear for us over the years. I can't, Kevin, I remember we missed a tornadic storm because of road construction. And that has happened repeatedly. Even Alex, we were in it last just a couple of years ago in the same area.
Yeah, you could argue that it didn't help us missing out on that Akron Tornado Fest in 2023.
Yes. Yeah.
Between that and the muddy roads and just washed out roads in general, that was quite a mess.
Yeah. A lot of flash flooding. So you always know when you're chasing in eastern Colorado, if everything's really, really green, you may have some issues because a lot of those roads, even on an atlas, they're actually dirt and gravel, and so that can actually cause some problems if you've had a lot of rain. So I always use if Colorado, eastern Colorado is really green. Same with Wyoming, western Nebraska. Probably got a lot of ambient moisture, probably favorable thermodynamic environment for tornadoes, but you might have travel problems.
Yeah, Kevin remembers back in 2014. Um, that was absolutely the coldest trip I've had out there. I normally, wear shorts and t-shirts, and I had on every piece of long clothes, long sleeves, and jacket the entire time I was out there. It was cold. I think Kevin, we were dealing with recycled moisture coming going up the eastern slopes of the Rockies, and we actually, let's see if I can do this here. One of the days we I'm gonna try to share my screen here. Let's see what we could do here. Let's see. Come on, you gonna do it for me? All right, can you see that?
Mhm.
Yeah, this was a day that I think we were up in Nebraska, and we were having our morning meeting, and I had run into a guy that I had known before. He was from the Boulder, Colorado office, the National Weather Service office, and he and his boss, I don't know if it was the Sioux or somebody, they were chasing together, and I invited him to the morning meeting, and the MIC, no, the Sioux actually stuck his head in the door, and said, "Don't bother about planning this. Head to the Denver airport. Park as close as you can to the Denver airport." Well, guess where we are right here? We're just east of all the terminals in the Denver airport, looking at this supercell that apparently dropped a tornado that we couldn't see from where we were. But that was the day that all the chasers were on that one storm and we're heading east on that one east-west road. But that was what we were looking at.
Yeah, I remember they said, get on the runway if possible. And, yeah,
Yeah,
and it was the Colorado cyclone kind of thing, and they know that pattern, and it formed right where it always does, a little south of Denver, and it was coming off, off the Rockies towards the general vicinity of the airport, and chased us right down to last chance when we took the last chance to cut out on it.
Yeah, so Kev, you can kind of recall some very tough patterns in the 2000 to 2010 time frame in terms of an unfavorable pattern. So 2006 comes to mind. That was dreadful, but it was an overachieving trip for us. You want to kind of explain?
Well, that was the hard northwest flow. We always, it seemed like when Dave and I would around the 2005 to 2010 era, a lot of times we get that stupid Hudson Bay vortex up there, and then we have that hard northwest flow, and it was really bad that year. So they had been having some severe weather. It shut down. we're headed out on Mother's Day that year, and it just shut down. And so there's no severe weather except on the day we're heading out. I think there was there a, was it a moderate risk? It was a pretty high risk in North Carolina. So Dave, I'm driving over there to, to before we pick up the kids, pick up the students, and he says, "I've got a crazy idea. Let's go to North Carolina." And you know what? We caught a tornado outside the Raleigh-Durham area that day. So a brief tornado, but after we caught that, that was that the farthest east I guess we've ever caught a tornado on a Hokie Stormchase.
Yeah, and I can clearly remember when we crossed back westward through the Smokies, you could look up at the mountains and see what looked like snow showers, maybe
Yeah.
people coming down. This is May.
So we go across Tennessee. We don't really know where to go. So we actually went through the tornado path at Caruthersville, Missouri, Marmaduke, Arkansas. And I grew up in Northeast Arkansas, so it was my neck of the woods. In fact, we stayed in Jonesboro, Arkansas, where I was born. I actually slept in the room I grew up in at my parents' house. So everybody else was at the hotel. But the next day, we had that southeast moving upper low coming down out of Canada, like southeast across Wisconsin and Illinois. And there was what today would be a marginal risk. It was the old C text. You remember they used to use C text? And so, some of the students really did a good job of forecasting. I think they called that Decatur, Illinois would be the spot where there would be the enough overlap of factors that we could have. We were hoping for what, a shelf cloud or, you know, and we ended up there and with this monster supercell that just kept spinning out these wall clouds and multiple tornado warnings and we were on the only storm worthwhile in a 7-day period there, and that was quite an accomplishment. We never did confirm a tornado with that, but it was like when I think about all the trips we've done, that's the one of the days that stands out for me just because the return on investment was so much higher than expectation. If you go out for a high risk day and you come out with, some swirly clouds, that's kind of a bust. But on a day like that, when there was very little expected and we had these beautiful structure storms and just repeatedly, we stayed in one place and watched 3 wall clouds go by, just on the southwest side of this kind of, you know, storm cluster, where they were just getting a little bit discreet. Um, that to me was one of the best days we've ever had.
Yeah, and I know, one of the things at the conference that I wanted to kind of post to you all is just kind of food for thought for the audience members as well, is to try to recall a storm that if you could, that you would like to revisit. And I have one clear storm that I would be my top priority, way, way above all others. And it wasn't one that produced a big EF4 tornado or anything. It was the Waukene 2008 evening or sunset tornadic supercell. And it wasn't for the tornado. Yeah, it was a close intercept, nice tornado, all of that good stuff. But the ethereal lighting on that storm, I have never seen. I've seen kind of Waukene light kind of versions of that in terms of the ominous look to it, but I have never seen lighting that was that eerie before and since. That tops all storms that I've ever intercepted over 3 decades, just in terms of the eeriness, ominous nature of the storm. And I would love to actually revisit that. Our video just can't do it justice. It just does not do it justice. But just being there, you could just sense, wow, this is a bad, bad place to be, just based on the weirdo lighting that was occurring. And I know Andrew, that probably is one of the most frightening kinds of environments that you've been in too.
Oh, easily. And with that being my, first chase I'd been on, first, close encounter with a tornado I've had. And at the end of a long day, you're worn out, and you're like, here's this last one. Or like, oh shoot, did we mess up? Like, did we just wear ourselves out so bad all day that we just put ourselves in a bad position? But yeah, I mean that one, and when it was so dark that there was no definition to the clouds whatsoever, you couldn't see a thing. All you could see was just a dark funnel cloud dropping out from of the flat line of black clouds in front of us, and then just that deep gold orange background that was partially obscured by rainfall on the backside of it. You're right. It's something I've never seen since.
So, Chris,
I can
out
share
there?
one. I've got one geared up here if I can get to it. Let's see. It's that one.
Ah, yes.
This was actually the day before the El Reno tornado in 2013. This was somewhere between Guthrie and Tulsa, I think, somewhere up in that area. And we'd already seen a tornado earlier that day. And the tornado itself this was on another storm, wasn't all that impressive. But we pulled off this the road here and sat there for I don't know what, half an hour
Yeah.
watching this thing with no other chasers around. And the structure on this thing just made your jaw drop. I've got other pictures that will do it justice even better than this. But this was the structure on this thing was incredible. And if I could go back and just maybe even get a little bit closer, a different vantage point on this one, I'd love to do it.
Yeah, I think this was actually that north-south road actually was the road that they filmed intersected with the roads that they filmed the drive-in sequence in Twister back in 1996. So it was kind of up in that Guthrie area. The
Mhm.
Guthrie was actually where we saw the tornado touch down. It was kind of a nice elephant trunk, but there was some terrain and trees
Right.
and stuff that was kind of blocking it. But yeah, this particular storm just had just frisbee stack after frisbee stack up on top of it.
It did. And then a little bit later, you could the streamwise vorticity current, you could see that coming in from the north, and that was just incredible. So I could go back to this one and spend, all day watching it.
So, how about you, Alex, with any of our particular trips, anything that sticks out? I know, a lot of people would probably say a default Dodge City kind of thing, but Dodge was almost tornado overload.
Yeah.
And you're just seeing one after another spin out, each one bigger than the previous one. But I was telling Kevin that year. I actually enjoyed Leote more than Dodge because, I mean, we were on the back
Yeah.
roads, it wasn't crowded. We were among the very first people on Dodge. We actually drove under the storm to get positioned on it. So we actually drove so we were there. That storm looked like a nuclear detonation going off. It had a big Polaris cap on it, and we drove underneath it to get on the eastern side of the storm so we'd have a better viewing point, a north-south road where we could kind of keep up with it. And so, we were there throughout its entire life cycle. But Leote to me, it was a more personal storm since we
Mhm.
were kind of on the back roads there, had the storm to ourselves a lot. Yeah, it spun out a tornado, but the structure was great, but it just seemed like a more personable kind of experience. So, does any of our trips, any particular storm really stick out to you?
Yeah, I would have to agree with you actually. And I had this queued up. I'll see if it'll work. I've got some video. Have no idea if it'll go or not, but it's actually of Leote. Um, can you guys see that?
Yeah, I remember the day. It was windy.
And so, yeah, that was the morning. This was the two cells merging before it really took off. And this was right when it was producing that tornado. And then, of course, here in like a couple of seconds, you'll start to see that structure really start to come through. Honestly, that's one of my favorite ones that we've probably ever caught, just because we were able to get so close. And gosh, the structure on this storm was so crazy. Probably some of the best that I've seen. Of course, you had the Mattis in the background. You've got just like textbook structure going on. The students were loving it.
Yeah, and I remember the inflow. You could hardly even open the doors or close the doors. The inflow was so strong to that. But the other thing is, look at the roadway.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
there's nobody there,
there's
right?
nobody there.
Yeah, and you'll see here in a second that inflow when some of these guys get out of the car. A couple people lost hats. You'll see right there,
Yeah,
sucked it right off. But yeah, we were able to just, I don't know. I think somebody likened it to prom and meeting your date on the dance floor, and we danced with this storm for like what 2 hours, maybe a little
yeah,
bit more.
yeah,
And so that's probably up there for mine. And then, if you could pick like a 4 day stretch, I mean, this was only 2 days before Dodge, and we were right there for that too. So
mm,
that was probably one of the more memorable weeks. But I mean, a close second would be something like the Chugwater Cyclones. Those were always good.
yeah. Yeah, and one of the things that was nice about Leote is, you know, I love nice, clean structure, but that kind of bridged the gap between really menacing looking and nice, clean structure. You still had that nice kind of visual cue of a mesocyclone, but at the same time, it looked wicked at the very same time. So it had a lot of visual appeal.
Definitely.
And it's kind of interesting. I always thought for a grad project for a student, to actually go back and look at a lot of these archive storms on which ones produced tornadoes, which ones didn't. But I wish I could have shown the video of Bowdle because many of these storms have a similar kind of structure on that forward flank of the storm. Visually, they look very similar in many, variations on a theme, but oftentimes they have that really well-defined forward flank, almost a shelf cloud-like feature on the forward flank of the storm. And oftentimes, I'm just in going back in memory, have seen so many tornadoes develop from storms that have that structural appearance. And we know the forward flank downdraft interaction and kind of ingesting that vorticity into the storm can help strengthen low level rotation in the storms and all of that kind of stuff. But being able to actually see that visually as visual cues in terms of the storm structure is always interesting.
Yeah, here's a really good example of that, actually. If I can pull this up again, I swear I'm really slow at this. Um, but this was Russell.
Okay.
And
Yep.
so you can see that really well defined forward flank of this thing. And you can see the tornado in between the tree line there,
Yep.
bottom center. Really beefy mezzo on this storm as it kind of took off. And then with this one especially, you can see, well, there's Dave. This is the one that the mezzo actually ended up getting occluded back there to the left. And we would eventually see a tornado pop out to the left here, further on down the road, which was kind of wild. Whoops. But just a good example.
Yeah, and that actually would rank up there with me because I didn't shoot video on that storm. And I know when we first pulled off on the side of the road at the little gas station and the wall cloud was just right out in the field, it was trying to tornado on us. And the electricity in that storm was wild. It was like a war zone going on, and I was just I remember I really almost came over the radio and said, "Sorry guys, we're gonna have to stay in the vans," because I was really nervous, but I just didn't have the heart to actually do that because the lightning flashes, most of them were behind us. And it was just constant. And I know, Kevin, we saw that 2008 a lot as well with some of these tornadic storms, just the constant lightning, constant thunder, it never stopped. And with Russell here, the flashes behind us were highlighting everything out in front of us. So you knew it hit somewhere behind us. And I was just crossing my fingers the whole time, to make praying that we wouldn't have a strike that would take us out.
It seemed like a lot of times the most danger we had with lightning was not when there was a lot of it, but when there was only like, I remember Chris and I pulling up in 2014 in North Texas, and people were out of the van, and there was that one bolt of lightning that was, what is that, maybe 150 feet out in the field.
If that far.
Yeah, and smoke was rising from the burned vegetation, and you've never seen 18 people get in vans faster than that happened. And for some reason, I don't think I was not in outside, and I was feeling kind of smug that I was not out there. But um, anyway, so the lightning is always huge. Dave's always stresses this when he talks to people about chasing, is the tornado is like fifth on the list of dangers. It's like, flooding. We've had experiences with flooding. Same trip with Chris and I had flooding situation. We've had, the big hail running out from under it. I know Chris and Dave and I, was it 2018 when we're at Waukene, Kansas again, and we got ourselves in a bad place under that storm, and I was looking up through the windshield, and it looked like big flakes of
Mhm.
snow coming down, and they were banging, and just a little ways after we got out of it, there were baseballs coming down. So, and then the high winds, and then somewhere down the list is the tornado as far as the most dangerous part of chasing. Actually, the number one hazard is what it is for any cross country trip. It's traffic and road dangers. And we've had plenty of those with exploding tires on vehicles in front of us, shooting or metal rim way up in the air, and crazy stuff over the years.
Yeah, I remember some of those exciting things on the road, and traveling. I think the thing that a lot of people don't realize about chases, especially with the Hokie Stormchase, and most of the time I was with you, Dave, was with three vans, and trying to stay up with each other, and then going through cities and the traffic, and trying to maneuver through all that, and stay safe at the same time. That really is a big hazard that most people don't think about.
Yeah, and we're trying to keep three vans, and you're going through a small town with a single stoplight, and it splits us up. So could you imagine going through a suburban area and trying to keep three vehicles together with lights and traffic and turns? And so that's one of the reasons why, we kind of avoid those kinds of environments like the plague. And I do believe that the way that we have run the trip adds a lot. I do believe that the multiple vehicles, the radio chatter, it keeps the students engaged. Um, and I know for us as drivers, especially on those late night hauls to lodging and stuff, the radio chatter back and forth can help keep us awake and everybody safe.
Yeah,
Help keep us awake. But Catherine Prosif went with us several years and works for NBC now. She said that our chatter back and forth helped her go to sleep as we're going, down the highway.
Well, that's probably just the reflection of my lectures in class.
Dave, what was that one night that we were coming back, I think, from the Oklahoma Panhandle, and we had booked rooms. We couldn't go through down on I-40 because there was a bunch of storms down there, and we'd booked rooms somewhere north of Tulsa, and they got flooded out. And then so we're rolling along, and it's getting later and later at night. All these supercells are erupting in front of us with almost constant lightning. It was hard to drive. It was so bright.
Yeah.
And whoever was booking rooms finally found rooms in Wichita, I
I
think.
think it was north of Wichita.
And we
Yes.
pulled in at like 3 a.m.
Yeah. Yeah. And Alex has been part of those trips as well. Kevin too. All of us have been. And one of the things that I've found that's been very frustrating in recent years, this past year was an exception. we actually had pretty easy, relatively speaking, time finding lodging. But since the pandemic, a lot of the mom and pop places has shut down. We actually booked rooms, had them with a credit card, and when we got there, they had let the rooms out. We're pulling in
Twice.
at midnight wanting 9 rooms. And yeah, we don't have any, we let those rooms out. And thinking, do you not understand what the word reservation means? I even, you're holding them with my credit card and everything. And so that happened multiple times, and so that's been a very, very frustrating thing in recent years. So that's a ding against going to the bigger group. So it's once you go beyond 4 rooms, it's not a solid scale upward. It's almost like an exponential scale. It just gets harder and harder and harder to find that 6 rooms or that 9 rooms or whatever, on the road at the last minute. And then when you think you've booked them and you stop looking, and then you get there and they let the rooms out, that's really, really frustrating because I know, I guess, was that 2022, Alex, that happened, or 2023? That happened over and over again.
Yeah, definitely 2023 after the Chugwater Cyclone Day, because we thought we were done in Hawk Springs or just east of there. And turns out during that week, the whole state of Nebraska has some kind of country music
Festival.
festival. And so there weren't any hotel rooms in the entire state. And so we ended up, I think, in Burlington, Colorado, after going to 2 hotels. I think it was 2 that we had reserved rooms at, and got let down both times.
Yeah. And to make matters worse, we pulled into Burlington. It was between 3 and 3:30 a.m. And we ended up getting up in the morning early to leave to try to make it to a more eastern chase target, but which we didn't make. Anyway, we were just a little bit too late, but we paid $240 per room for 3 hours of nighttime stay, or 4 hours worth. Can you believe that? Very frustrating. Very, very
Hmm.
frustrating. Um, to find that happen. And we're not the only ones. I've talked to several people, and they've had that issue here recently too.
Yeah, it's a problem when you think you have it and then you really don't
Yep.
at 1 a.m.
Yeah, and as a co-leader, all you guys, you're trying to, keep everybody safe, keep everybody fed, keep a roof over their head, and you know, you're depending on other people to actually follow through and do their jobs. And when they don't, then you're hung out to dry and with no recourse. What do you do at 3 a.m. in the morning on the side of the road?
You
Yeah,
stop and get slushies and coffee.
Chris and I learned about this the hard way when Dave wasn't with us that time. We didn't have anything too disastrous with the rooms, uh, other than no breakfast somewhere, and we had to go scramble for breakfast or something. But it's that that's it's kind of like when you're responsible for that, you realize when you're a co-leader, a lot of times you're focused on helping drive and finding the storms. When you're actually leading the darn thing and doing all what Dave always had to do, it's such a responsibility to get everybody, lodging for the night and make sure everybody's safe and count heads when we head off and yeah, I was glad that Chris was there to help me that year too, and some other guys who aren't with us on the uh, call tonight, but and gals and it's it just that Dave did this for 30 years with various size groups and everybody came back safely. I think we had some broken fingers from a football one year and we had a few sicknesses along the way and stuff like that. But, vans of people puking, but other than that, everybody came back whole. No, I don't, so that's a big testament to what, the way Dave ran this trip all these years, that this formula works. And it's been a pleasure to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I always go go back to what a couple of Dave sayings. One is which, the goal is to come back with as many people as we left with. That's number one. And the other one is there's always going to be another storm. Don't put yourself at risk because there's always going to be another one. So those are two Dave-isms I still go by.
Well, and over time, as traffic has gotten worse and worse, and we've had to kind of evolve, changing our calendar dates on when we go, but then how we maneuver, and all of you all know too, how we maneuver around storms. If we're in an area where there's going to be some chaser convergence, no left-hand turns. I mean, we have to maneuver a different way around the storms, sometimes leaving them to actually get back onto them later on down the line. But it's something that you have to do. And again, my philosophy has always been when I'm not calling the shots in terms of navigation around the storm, I'm out of there. It's not worth it. And the main problem is traffic. So if you have open roads and got a good handle on the storm motion, and it's possible, and you all know we get pretty close in relative safety, relative being the operative word, but in relative safety, we can actually get pretty close to the action. But you've got to be able to, have that open escape route, not just an escape route, but an open escape route if needed.
Right. Well, hey guys, we're we're coming up on an hour. I actually extended this a few minutes, so we've got a few more minutes. But one of the things that I think would be kind of cool to bring up chases or an instance where things were a little strange, a little out of character. And I'll share this one. This was from I think it was 2015. Dave, we were coming up in heading north toward I-40 in Oklahoma, and we stopped to take a look at this. And we were talking earlier about wet seasons. This was a very wet year. And again, we had to stay on paved roads, but we actually pulled off and actually got a little closer to this Sunset Supercell. And when I got out of the vehicle, there were so many mosquitoes because it had been so wet. I remember smacking my leg and coming away with like three or four at one time. And that's how bad they were. So that was the kind of thing I would not want to go back to that particular storm in that time.
Yeah, I've had one of my mosquito issues in far southern Texas, anywhere from that Pecos to Fort Stockton line, when there's been a lot of wet weather. We got to a point on one of the roads that had been rainy, and I couldn't turn the van. It wouldn't make a turn, and the wheel wells were full of mud. And so I didn't have a trowel or anything. So I'm out there carving the wheel well out with a butter knife. And I am getting torn apart by mosquitoes at the same time. And that was absolutely miserable. So I always say, if it's rained, yeah, paved roads only in Pecos County, Texas.
Any other wacko things that people want to bring up before we close it?
Well, I think, Kevin, you could, not a wacko thing, but going back to 2006, after the initial tornado intercept near Durham, crossing Tennessee and then into Missouri, I still rank that as one of the highlights of the non-storm highlights of the trips that we've been on. You want to kind of describe our town by town tour briefly there?
Yeah, we were in that after our North Carolina intercept and headed west. The pattern was very weak, and we didn't really know. We really didn't have a good idea where we were going. We had no clue at that point. We were just going to head west. Well, we get into Tennessee, and it's like, okay, well, I was really aware of the big supercell that produced the long track, violent tornado that I don't know, was it 100 miles on the ground?
Over 100 miles.
Yeah, it was from near Pocahontas, Arkansas, across Marmaduke, Arkansas, the town I was very familiar with, into the across the Missouri Boot Heel to Caruthersville. I said, well, we're going to be close to that. Let's go up there and see the damage path. And somewhere there's a video of this, and the students are you can hear the students just gasping when they're seeing this damage, because for a lot of them, this was the first time they'd ever seen damage of that scale, and it was what, 2 weeks after it happened, or 3 weeks, something like that. And so it was just such a poignant moment. And I still remember when we pulled up in Marmaduke, we pulled up near a baseball field, and the kids were out playing baseball just like nothing, just like they normally would. But on the hill behind them, there was all this damage, buildings, smashed, and trees torn up. And it was just a kind of a real deep, poignant moment that life goes on, in spite of the destructiveness of these tornadoes. And we, as chasers, have the privilege of driving off somewhere. We get to drive away from it, and yet people are still living there behind us. And over the years, all the different stories we heard from the people we would meet in the plains and elsewhere about the storms they've had. But that was a moment. I think it really drove it home. And then we went and ate good catfish at a buffet I was familiar with.
You can always trust Kevin to find a good catfish place when you're in the Mississippi Valley, or the Delta area.
Yeah, I remember Dave standing by the side of the road watching a tornadic storm after dark eating catfish.
That actually kept Chris is probably the top weirdo thing. So unfortunately, a killer
Yeah.
tornado that we were watching that storm. But yeah, Lambert's Cafe in Sykeston. Yeah, went out scoping the storm out. I remember running in and saying, "Hey guys, we got to go. There's a storm out here." And so I think most people had finished, but you picked up my tab. Do I still owe you for that meal, Chris?
I
No,
think we're I think
I'm
we're
good.
even by now.
I'm good for it, Chris. Trust me, 15 years later. Um, but yeah, so Chris hand delivers my catfish dinner to me. So we're watching this tornadic supercell on the side of the road, this lightning show, this great structure on the side of the road. And I'm sitting there eating my Lambert's Cafe catfish dinner while we're watching this supercell.
Any last thoughts anybody want to bring up? We just hit our hour mark.
I guess my goofiest memory I'll have of all my trips is that we were in eastern Nebraska. I think it was northeast of York. We'd watch this really low, scraggly wall cloud cross 80, and we were kind of following it. And it was becoming a hail producer, so we didn't, jab at it too much. We didn't have many good options to keep up with it. But it was going northeast, and all the roads there were obviously gridded. So where we stopped on the side of the road to kind of watch it, we were kind of looking around on the ground for hailstones, and people were finding, dimes, quarters, what have you. And then next thing we know, this thing just comes whizzing out of the sky and hits us. And Dave from behind the van yells, "It's donut hail!" And he's in there with a bag of powdered donuts, chucking them at us from the other side of the van. But
Just to get a reaction.
but that was always like the fun things with chasing with Dave is just those little lighthearted moments that just kind of came out of nowhere. We're here looking at this big storm and collecting hail off the ground. Next thing we know, we got donuts coming at us.
Well, one of the things and all of you all know that I read the riot act to our chase crew about we're ambassadors from Virginia Tech. And so we have to put our best foot forward all the time. But at the same time, I think that if you talk to the students that have been on the chase, most of them have a really good time. And, I mean, Alex, you're one of the funniest dudes ever on the radio. It's just, and it breaks up the monotony of driving and everything. And I think that the students really, really enjoy the camaraderie between all of the leaders. And let's face it, this trip would not be what it is without you all. I mean, you're a key anchor in all of this. So, yeah, that's what's made it great over the years. It's the personnel that not only keep the students safe, but yeah, I mean, we joke a lot. We have a lot of, fun times while we're out there trying to break the monotony of being on the road like that. So I really appreciate it because there's no way we could pull this off without number one, your expertise, but also, just your companionship. That's so good on the road.
A lot of good memories out there.
Yep, right back at you.
Well, why don't we wrap this up here, and we'll cut it off in a couple minutes. One of the things I would throw out there for the five of us is maybe a challenge. I've gotten to the point where, let's see, yeah, I'm the oldest guy on this call. I've gotten to the point where driving out to the plains is just not in my future anymore. I don't have that kind of stamina, but the Ohio Valley is not that far away. The five of us ought to go for a chase out there one spring. How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, when the pattern sets up, they get plains quality storms.
And they have some plains quality terrain too.
So you get west of 35, the US 35 corridor, or I guess it's 23, and west of Columbus, you're in pretty flat land.
Do we rent a minivan?
Just for the heck of it.
Sienna in my mind.
There have to be vanwiches.
Gotta be vanwiches.
Gotta be vanwiches.
Gotta be.
Although these days I'm gluten-free, so I have to be careful. So, all right, guys, thanks for your time. Dave, thank you so much for all that you've done over the years for the Hokies and for all the meteorology students and specifically for your friendship. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. And again, I'm absolutely sincere. Could not pull all this stuff off without you all. The reason it's become so popular and it's such an iconic trip is because of you all.
All righty. With that being said, I think we'll just wave a good night.
All right, guys. Everybody take care.
Thanks for your time.